What is up, everyone? Welcome to Where Brands Get Their Edge. If you are a founder, we've got the truth. If you're a marketer, we've got the tools. Today, I have a very special guest. Um, hey, everyone, welcome to Where Brands Get Their Edge. If you're a founder, we've got the truth. If you're a marketer, we've got the tools. Today, I have a very special guest, my friend Jessica Fialkovich with Exit Factor. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on. I saw Jessica speak. I've known Jessica for years. We met at MIT at the Entrepreneurial Masters program, and I've always known she was the GOAT when it comes to exits. But I saw her speak recently in EODC, and I didn't realize how much there was for people who are not really ready to exit, which was, I went just because she's my friend and to support her, and now we're fortunate to have her right before her book drops,
Yeah,
which
like
is very
literally.
exciting. Or by now it's dropped. By the time you're watching this, the book is out. Um, so thanks again for coming, Jessica. You want to tell everyone quickly how you got into this space?
Yeah, happy to. I started my first business 18 years ago. It was actually in the luxury wine space. So owned a retail store and we were brokers for wine priced between $500 and $25,000 a bottle. Which I always joke because like before that business, like the most expensive wine I had ever had was $10 a bottle, right? And so I just kind of fell into that business and we built a really successful company. But 4 years later, I had the opportunity to sell it. And I really did nothing to plan or prepare for that sale. So through that process, I made a lot of mistakes. I sold for probably way less than the company was worth. I paid a lot more in taxes than I should have, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. And I sold to the wrong buyer because she was the first buyer that showed up. And because of that last critical mistake, the company failed 2 years later. All my employees lost their jobs, my customers lost their vendor, all of that stuff. And so that's really what inspired me to start thinking about exit planning as a career and as my next phase of life. And so I've spent the last 15 years in exit planning and mergers and acquisitions. I've led a very large M&A and business brokerage firm for the last 15 years, overseeing more than 1,500 exits. But now I'm focused more on like the planning and the preparation side. So in 2018, I started my company now that's called Exit Factor, really to work with business owners and start thinking about your future before it just kind of shows up at your doorstep like mine did, right? So thinking that 3 to 7 year exit strategy.
So that was my big takeaway too, because when I came to see you speak, again, I was just, I was there for the event, I was there to support, right? Because I feel like I'm so far from exiting. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get caught in this trap of either it's a lifestyle business I'm never going to sell, and one of the most interesting things you said was like, you're exiting one way or another,
Totally. Yeah. I
right?
mean,
What were the ways you said that people could exit or would exit either way?
you could exit either. I mean, my joke is you either, walk out the door head held high or you go feet first, right? I mean, like we're going to exit, like unless like Elon Musk discovers like eternal life, right? I think he's just all gonna ship us to Mars anyway. But like we're all gonna exit. Like it is. We don't get to stay on this earth forever, right? And I think the interesting part is that in all my work, 95% of the exits I've overseen were 95% were unplanned, right? So like it wasn't the plan. It's because people get burnout, we have different life changes, illness, family changes, family dynamics. And so like our plans don't go 100% how we want them to. Shockingly, we should know that. We're all in business, right?
Well, and I think a lot of people assume their kids are going to take the business, and A, that's just not thing I think most kids seem to want anymore, which is shocking to me, frankly. But I'm seeing more and more entrepreneurs whose kids just don't want to be in the business. And then B, they think that like they're going to be able to make this happen whenever they want because it's so valuable to them. They think other people are going to feel the same way, and they just don't realize how tied to the business they are. And then when they go to sell it, either nobody wants it, or to your point, they get like a doo-doo valuation for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the hardest part is so the number one reason for exit is burnout. Like the owner just hits the end and they're like, okay, I'm done. Now I'm ready to move on and sell and I want to move on with my life or give it to my kids. You're right. I think it's like less than 6% of businesses transition to the second generation, less than 3% to the third, and fourth generation's like I met a fourth generation owner a couple weeks ago. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity, right? Because they just don't exist anymore.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I was gonna say if you go down too many generations, they're gonna fuck up the business anyway,
Yeah.
right? Like you're
Usually
better
third
off
gen-
taking the cash and giving them a chance to kind of make their own life.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you get to this point as an owner and you are feeling burnout or you're feeling done, right? Then if you wait till that point to make the changes, to make it attractive to the market, make it attractive to potential buyers, you don't have the energy. Like you don't have the desire to do it anymore.
Well, and
So,
I have an uncle who I almost didn't put two and two together until hearing your talk, who had a business and was crushing it, right? And it was a landscaping business, and he was making an unconscionable amount of money. But he wasn't spending time with his kids. He wasn't working anywhere, and he went to sell the business. And they said the same thing, like, you are the business. We can't sell it. And so he got it ready to sell. He had hired consultants, set up systems, and all this like rigmarole. And then he was like, oh, I don't want to sell it. Like, I don't have to come in all the time. And that tie, this was kind of my biggest takeaway from your talk as well, was building a business that is worth selling, that is going to get you a valuation that you want, is also the business that's going to give you the lifestyle that you want.
yeah.
Right? And that's why I felt like there was so much value in this for everyone. And I came in expecting to not take anything, and I'm like scribbling notes. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? So what are your top three things entrepreneurs should do regardless of when they want to sell?
Yeah. So I bucket it into this. Like I'd say that every business should give the owner time, money, and freedom, right? And if we break those down into what that means, and I'll kind of cover top level of that, and we can dive a little bit deeper. But time means that the business should be independent of the owner, right? You should own your business, not operate it. We've heard like that from Michael Gerber and EOS and all that for years, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still operating. I'm in
And
it.
like there's phases that like we go through. Like I'm still operating, right? Like what's going on with my business. I'm pretty in it right now, right? And there's different phases, but ultimately we want to build a leadership team, and we want the business to be less dependent on us. So that's giving us the time and the flexibility. And then the money component, we don't talk about like a lot. Like I feel like too, revenue has been so glorified in entrepreneurial communities that we don't focus on what's truly important when you run a business, and that's just profitability, right? And so, and that's what leads to a lot of the burnout too, because if you think about if you own a business that's sucking up all your time, right, and you can't spend time with your family, you can't go on vacation, like you're doing all the things, and it's not paying you a lot, like, and you're having to reinvest in the business, or you're not being able to, at worst, pay your bills, maybe at best take that vacation, you can't afford it. Now we've got the recipe for like burnout. And then ultimately, the freedom component is you get to choose, like the freedom to choose when and how you exit. So that's when you get into those, what are those exit options for you? Most people do end up selling in today's day and age, but could there be a management buyout? Could there be employees that take over? Maybe there is a family transition that can happen if it's well planned out in advance. But these are things that don't happen in a year or two, right? So those are the three buckets really that you have to do.
So I've fallen into the revenues vanity and profits insanity trap, and I had a crazy wake up call. It was an adjacent but business plan that I had, right? I had this idea to kind of like conglomerate a couple things together and offer everything under one roof type deal. And I met some guy who was doing it. And he was doing like 60, 70 million a year. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get close to this guy. This is what I want to do. And I got a peek behind the books, and we ended up like developing a relationship, and he was like kind of down to help me out. And on like 60 million, he was taking home like 150 grand. It was I mean, he could have been selling cars at CarMax making more money. It was the craziest thing I would ever see. And I think people get caught in this idea that, oh, I'll just sell it at the end. And to your point, with that kind of profit, like who the fuck wants it?
Nobody. Honestly, so like when I hear those stories, right, you think about what you have to do to support 60 to 70 million, right, in revenue, and you think about the liability and the risk that goes with that. I mean, whether it's product or service, either you have a ton of products that you're sitting on, right? Or you have a ton of people that are delivering the service. Okay, we can make the argument that like in tech, you could have light on either, but you're still gonna have tech developers and all kinds. So like when I hear stories like that, my mind goes like asymmetrical risk return, meaning asymmetrical risk for like no return whatsoever, right? And so like nobody wants anything like that. There was a very small period, especially in tech, probably prior to the pandemic, where there were some VCs and some angels that were investing stupid valuations into some tech companies, but you're not seeing that happen anymore, even in this AI bubble, right?
Yeah, that's going to be a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
I'm very nervous about what's going to happen when that pops, which is inevitable at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so big three were
Time. So let's start with time, right?
yeah, no,
Which means that the business can't be reliant on you. And we've, like I said, we've heard this from different business speakers, but what I've always had a problem with is like, okay, that's great, but it's not like I'm just going to wake up one day and all my responsibilities are going to be gone as an owner. I'm a very like process and systems person. So I'm the type of person that's like, all right, tell me the path of how to get there. And so what I've found is that there's four main roles that you really don't want to be involved in your business, right? And those are the riskiest roles. And that means like if you're going to sell the business, if you're going to transition the business, I mean, hell, like if you're going to take a vacation, you don't want to be in these roles because if you're not there, the business stops. And so the first role is sales, right? Or revenue generation. So I think for most founders and most entrepreneurs, you're always going to play like a bit of a rainmaker role. That's just how it is, right? But you want to be responsible for generating less than 20% of the revenue in your company. And honestly, if you look at all of your sellers across the business, you don't want, it's called key man risk. You don't want anyone responsible for more than 20% because if something happens to that person or yourself, revenue goes away, right?
that's definitely going to be the last thing that comes off my plate.
Yes, and it usually is. And like I said, it's still like, I mean, I still find that most founders play rainmaker, right? When the big deals come, like you just have to, right? But transitioning that. So the second role is similar to that is account and client management, right? So if in your business, typically you're going to sell a product or service, and then if you have an ongoing relationship with that client, usually it transitions to account management or account management teams. And you want to be responsible for, same thing, less than 20% of those accounts, because ultimately you want these customers doing business with your company and your team, not just you as a person, right? And that's going to remove the risk. Like when you go to sell a company, one of the buyer's biggest fears is, if this owner goes away, then what happens to the customers? Do they go away too? So
Dude, my previous business was a family business. My dad had a print shop, like a Sir Speedy Minuteman.
yep,
And when I took it over,
yeah.
not a different buyer, when I bought it, I lost a bunch of his customers. We had a bunch of customers that I was not their second favorite printer.
Yeah.
So even in that scenario, forget about if he had sold to someone he didn't know.
It's just the relationship piece, right? So so we get out of sales first, right? Then get out of client account management second. Now it's to get out of delivery of the services or products. If it's a product-based business, I don't find most owners are in there like, making the thing, right? They usually have a team doing that, but it happens in service-based businesses a lot, right? Service-based businesses, a lot of owners start their business because they were good at delivering their service, right? Like they were a great accountant, hated working for their big four firm, started their own accounting practice, and now they feel comfortable preparing tax returns, right? Or whatever the metaphor is in your industry. And that's a role you really don't want to be in, because now you're looking for like a specific skill set in the buyer of the business to take it over, right? Not just somebody who can own and manage a business, but someone who can own and manage a business and do the thing that you're good at, right? So
Yeah, I think another trap here is for a lot of founders that BD and account manager role are the same.
Yes, that's true
Right?
too.
And that's an even like deeper trap. Do you want to tell the story of the
A dental implants, yeah.
yeah,
So
that was fascinating to me.
yeah, it's a fascinating story. Like what I love about my business is like I learn all these ways how people make money, right? And
No, that's one of the things I love about my business, right?
yeah,
Every time we pull back the hood, how are they marketing? What's the product? How do they find their people?
yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool space to be in. So my husband came home one day and he was like, I've got this great new client. He's been in business for 40 years. Revenue's been growing. He does nothing in the business. He doesn't do any sales. He does no account management, nothing. Well, so this business was, they manufactured veneers, right? And I didn't know this before we started working with them, but At the time, you can make veneers two different ways. It's evolved a little bit now with 3D printing. But the first way is that you took a mold of your teeth and then they made them out of the molding, right? But if you really wanted like the Rolls Royce of veneers, right? Like the really high end ones, you could get them hand carved, right? So he's telling me the story. He's like, he only does one thing in the business. And I was like, let me guess. He like actually hand carves the teeth. And he's like, yeah, he does. And he's like, and he's world renowned. Like everybody comes to him, all the dental labs, like only want to work with him. And he's so excited about this. And all I'm hearing, I'm like, there's no way in hell we're ever going to find somebody who can replace him in this business. Right. And so, kudos to my husband's sales skills. He did find somebody that was willing to take it over. But the seller had to sign like a 5-year employment agreement. The value went down. It was mostly seller carried. Like it just wasn't a great deal overall, right? And the new buyer came in and he said to the seller, like, hey, where did you learn how to hand carve teeth? And he's like, well, I went to this hand carving teeth institute or whatever it was called. And so he like marches himself down to like the dean and he's like, would you ever want to do an apprentice program? And the dean's like, yeah, of course, that sounds amazing. And so like 6 months later, he had 4 kids and they're trained up. He wasn't like as good as the seller. It was like basically Picasso of teeth, right? But they were like, 70, 80% as good. 2 years into his employment contract, the buyer actually let the seller go. But if we think about that, like in 6 months, he had backups for the seller, right? And in 2 years, he had pretty decent replacements that he could let the seller go. And here's a guy who owned the company for 40 years and had told himself this story that I can't ever replace myself in this business. No one can do it as good as I can, right? And maybe not, right? But like 80 to 90% is close enough, right? So
Everyone thinks both their business and their skill set are these like beautiful, unique snowflakes that don't exist anywhere else. And it's like, no, we find a way.
yeah. One of the things I think is really interesting, I don't know if you remember this, but we were sitting in MIT our first year and Vern Harnish was speaking. And he said the weakest part of a company is always the founder's skill strength. And I think that's so true is because that we think we're so strong in a certain area that we don't actually go to look to see if there's somebody stronger in that skill set or that area. And so then it becomes the business's weakness.
I have that problem a bit. A little bit is just like hubris. A little bit is like I want to be really good.
I know, right?
And so
Yeah.
I've been doing. We've been talking about this internally a little bit. I've been doing like I used to do a lot of actual design, like logo, everything, right? Like I make a website in a weekend, right? Like I used to do a lot of the actual creative work myself, and I haven't. And so apps change where the buttons are. Like everything's different.
Yeah.
And I've been at this like crossroads. I'm like, man, do I need to brush up these skills and like get back in it? And like, I don't think I do, but I kind of want to,
Right.
But it sounds like this is my wake up call that it's a waste of time. So 1 is time, 2 is money.
Yep. 2 is money. So the money side, we talked a little bit about, you have to get out of this vanity of revenue. Like if revenue increases as like a metric because profit's increasing, great. But like our focus, especially if you have an operating business, if you're a brand new startup, yes, you have to get revenue in the door, right? But once you get through that startup, that toddler phase, the mindset needs to switch to profit. And what I usually focus on is a term called EBITDA, which is your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's basically an accounting metric that levels the playing field across all businesses, all industries, no matter if you finance through debt or you depreciate hard assets, whatever, right? But I think it tells you if you actually have a good viable business model, like a good viable financial model, right? If we were like investing in stocks, like when we're investing in stocks and making other investments, we're not okay with like, people just going and like spending our money and losing all of it every year, right? We want to see a return on that investment, right? And it's the same thing even like in our homes. We want to see it appreciate over time, right? And I find that a lot of business owners don't do the same thing in their business, like where profitability should be their number one metric. One of the things we give our clients, I tell everybody they should do is they should just have a good understanding of what the average profit margin is or the average EBITDA margin is in their industry. Because a lot of owners like live in this world where they think, okay, I'm running at a good profit margin for my industry, but they're not. Like we were working with a coffee manufacturer once and he was running at an 8% EBITDA margin. He's like, "Oh, I'm killing it." Until we pulled his industry metrics and like the average in your industry is 18%, right? So you're actually 10 points less than the average, right? We're not even talking about killing it yet, right? We're just talking about being average. And there's
That
some ways,
was
yeah.
well, that was one I was, also I guess I was late to the party and everything, but that was the one I was a little late to the party on too, because I think you did too actually, but I came up through the accelerator program in NEO. Did you as
Yep.
well?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
that's it. And so like we really want to get over a million, to graduate, and I was really, really laser focused on that. And one of the first things I did when I got there was outsource all my finance because I'm like, I'm not good at numbers, outsource, get it off my plate, right? Like that's the kind of thing. But finance isn't one of those things, right? There's nothing, and I learned the lesson the hard way. There's no one that knows the ins and out of the business, and I don't do the bookkeeping. I don't write the
Yeah.
invoices, right? But like,
Yeah.
I'm in the numbers deep every month at least, looking at everything from like utilizations rate, expenses, right? Profitability per client, per job, per service line, because no one else, maybe at a certain size, but for my size, no one else is going to understand the intricacies of what we're actually spending money on, what it takes to deliver, and what it really takes to be profitable. Like I can have a fractional CFO, I can have a bookkeeper, but that still has to come from me.
Yeah. I always say like the CEO's number one job is financial viability of the company, right? Even when you grow bigger, you like, yeah, you'll have a CFO, you might have a whole finance team, right? But the CEO, and especially in founder-led companies, entrepreneur-led companies, no one knows the business better than the founder, right? And so over time it evolves, right? And I think this is one thing that it drives me a little crazy about the entrepreneurial community too, is like they'll be like, oh, your numbers aren't your thing, like just outsource it. No, like you need to learn numbers, right? Numbers are like, what doesn't Buffett say? Numbers are the language of business, right? So if you're not willing to learn that, like it's really going to harm your business. And so in the beginning, it might be like one of the exercises we teach our clients is like go through your overhead and go through like every single transaction and ask yourself, is this working or is this necessary in your business? But
I
then, yeah,
I still do it at least every 6 months, and
yeah.
it's there was some dumb CRM trial I signed up for. There was like $1,000 a month that I was just on autopilot paying like a dummy. I
Well, and if
completely
you
forgot and I thought I canceled it. I forgot to cancel it.
And if you think about it too, as your business grows and you have more people in the company and they have credit cards and expense accounts, like it can actually get way worse, right? And we still do it too. Our controllers actually train now. I get an email at the end of every month, be like, these are all the new charges that showed up on your credit card. Are they working? Are they necessary? And I have to like do a justification for it, and then I have to like allocate where it's going and which business, right?
Yeah, the
So,
old ones are important too because maybe they were necessary and now they're
and
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But then, over time it does evolve and you can get to the point where, you're looking at bigger buckets in the business and you're looking at, okay, now I understand what my percentage of revenue should be for marketing, for technology, right? And where it should be and where the bar should be, right? But diving
I had
deep into those numbers every quarter is really important. So,
I had a customer tell me one time. He goes, if you charge half as much, I bet you could get twice as much business. And I was like, so I'd make the same amount of money, top line, do twice as much work, and actually take less money home. Like, what about that sounds like something I would want to?
no, we actually worked with a marketing firm once, and I don't think I've ever told you the story, but they were top line like $5 million, and they were losing $250,000 a year. And it was because they under quoted for RFPs for really big clients. They wanted the big logos, like on their website,
Yeah.
right? And so when we broke down what their numbers were doing, one of their big logo clients was costing them $400,000 a year. So just to deliver the services and scope creep and whatever, and like just getting rid of that one client, yeah, it shaved 2 million off their revenue, but they went from losing over $200,000 a year to being profitable 220,000 a year just by getting rid of one client. So
Yeah. I mean that's crazy.
yeah,
And I
it
know
was.
everyone's got there are versions of that everywhere. But
Yeah.
that's why, again, how much you're making per client, how much you're making per project, how much you're making per service line. And it's so important to your point in quoting as well. Right? Like if I know my minimum I gotta make an hour on a project. You know what I mean? Like split across everyone makes a different amount of money. We have a certain amount of overhead, this and that, right? But it took me longer than I care to admit to figure out
Yeah.
this stuff.
So the money piece is important because of the profit piece, but as much as like I think I hate to be like the bearer of bad news to everybody, when it does come to exit and what your valuation is based on, it's more than half based on the numbers, right? So the value of a company is a multiple times EBITDA or earnings equals what the company is worth, right? And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, the potential and look at all the great systems I built and whatever. And all the investors, all the buyers are just going to come back to say, okay, show me what your EBITDA is, show me how you stack up against your competitors and your profit margin. And that's largely what's going to drive your valuation at the end.
Well, and I'm blanking on what it's called, but what did you say it was called when like you want to pull stuff out that you were like writing off
Oh,
this?
add backs. Yeah, my
Yeah,
favorite.
well, I didn't realize because I had seen people try to do that before, and you were saying that's like not a thing anymore.
It's really not. So valuation.
Explain what it is quickly for everyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, so add backs or adjustments are when you have expenses in your business that are non-essential, right? Or they're personal in nature and you're just using them as a tax write-off. And then at the end, when you go to sell your business, you'll be like, "Oh, I don't need, this trip to Cabo for strategy planning every year. We'll just add it back to my profitability," right? And it wasn't like a well-known thing, a well-known adjustment to do for a very, very long time, until probably I'd say the last 7 or 8 years. But now it's getting like crazy. Like the stuff we see in some of these add backs or adjustments, we were working with a drywall company and the guy had leased 14 Lamborghinis through the business, right? And so he was trying to add back all the 14 lease payments. And ultimately, like, the buyer and seller can come up with whatever metrics they want to value the company, but someone's going to provide the funding, right? And it's usually a bank or a non-bank lender. And those people and those banks don't like these games that business owners play where I'm going to just stuff a bunch of expenses and personal stuff in my business so then it reduces my profitability so I don't have to pay taxes now. And then when I go to sell, I'm just going to add all that back. Like it was meaningless, right? And so a lot of the bankers won't accept any of these add backs or adjustments anymore. They're saying, well, if you didn't need it, why did you pay for it through the business? If you didn't need it in the business, then you should have paid for it personally or paid for it through another business, right? But if it's in there, we're going to keep it in there, right?
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So it's also like, I think too, a lot of this is when you get into the M&A space, a lot of it's like psychology, right? And so if you think about the owner that's cheating the government out of all those taxes to pay for 14 Lamborghinis, now the buyer and the lender are making assumptions on what else he's doing in his business, right? Because of how he's doing that one thing. And whether it's founded or unfounded, in this case, it's totally unfounded, right? It was just, he just didn't want to pay taxes to the
14
government.
Lamborghinis is, I think, safely unfounded.
Yeah. But like it's just like it's the buyer and the lender start telling themselves this whole story of like, well, if he's doing this, then what else is he doing, right? That we don't know about, right? Yeah.
What's third?
Third is the freedom to exit. So the freedom to exit and the freedom to choose. So a lot of us don't realize how long it takes to pull this stuff together, right? So say you're out of the business is making money, right? And you actually love your business, but you decide you want to sell it, right? It's still going to take you at bare minimum a year to get that done, right? And if you want to set up I mentioned one of the big mistakes that I made was paid too much in taxes. So there are things you can do to reduce your tax liability when you exit, because as business owners,
Like move to Puerto Rico?
yeah, that's one of them. That's one of them, right? But a lot of these strategies, like you've got to set up well in a year of advance of listing the business for sale, right? So sometimes like you just need some time to plan, but there's basically 4 ways you can exit a business. And we've talked a little bit about them offhanded, but one is you can sell the business to an external party, right? So that could be an individual, it could be a competitor, what we call a strategic buyout. It could even be private equity or going public, right? So that's sell externally. Sell internally is going to be selling to your management team, so either a key employee or a group of key employees. The third option is to do a family transition, which we mentioned. And then the fourth option is a organized dissolution, which is basically a fancy way of shutting the business down in an orderly manner, right? Which actually can still be a profitable venture if it's done right. But all of those like take some time. But if you give yourself the time to think about that and say, okay, in the future, my ideal exit option is I'm going to leave my business to the kids, right? But my backup option is I'm going to be prepared to sell it if I have to too. And you get things in order to be able to execute on those options any given year. No matter if something happens to you or you change your mind or you get a once in a lifetime opportunity, you're going to be able to execute on one of those options and have a lot more freedom to control your future. So,
all right, when is the right time for someone to reach out to you?
So I always say, so we offer a service called an exit assessment, which basically looks at what the business is worth today, and then it does future planning. So identifies those exit options and then identifies what the business could be worth in the future. I say every business owner should have that at a bare minimum, right? Because a lot of people go into this process and they're like, well, I don't know what my options for exit are, right? And if I were going to sell or exit, like what would my business even be worth? Or like worst case scenario, they just Google it and like Google will be like, oh, well, the average multiplier in your industry is this. And averages don't mean anything, right? There's ranges. So I say that's like good to have at any given time, as long as you're past that startup phase. Like when you're in that startup, like first year or two, it's hard to establish a good baseline, but after that, you should have that done probably annually. So.
Nice. And then where can they find you?
So you can find my company exitfactor.com, or you can find me on social media, mainly on LinkedIn and Instagram at Jessica Fialkovich.
And we'll have all her links here, depending on where you're watching.
Yeah.
And the book will be out.
The book will be out.
Find it. I'll have a link to that here as well, everywhere.
Yep.
Otherwise, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hope this is helpful to all your listeners.
I mean, I thought this was gold, which is why I wanted you on. I started implementing some of this stuff immediately after your talk. I hope everyone else got value of it too. If you have any questions for her or us, hit us up. Thanks.
Thanks.